George Kilpatrick Inspiration for the Nation, celebrating people that we feel good about. Dr. William Pollard. We all call him Bill. I call him Bill, but he's allowing me to call him Bill because he's earned his PhD, right? I believe it's from the University of Chicago, but but Dr. Bill Pollard is President Emeritus of University of District of Columbia, Medgar Evers College, former and Dean Emeritus at the Syracuse University School of Social Work. That's just a little bit of the stuff that he's done. If that ain't enough, but I love Bill Pollard because I know Bill Pollard studies and he reads and he has had a profound impact on this community. And so as he approaches, and I'm going to say it out loud, his 80th birthday, as he approaches that, I said, Bill, I got to get you on, and I want you to have a conversation with me about your reflections, about his reflections, about what's happening in community today. And I know I sent you a note, and I said, what new eggs do you have for us? Because over the years, Bill would give a speech, and he would talk about, I don't know how many eggs you would drop, but there was a speech he would do, and it had to do with eggs. And he would leave these little eggs, and he would do that in the community. So anyway, he's back home in the Cuse. Do you call yourself retired? I don't know what you call yourself, because he be out here in these streets. But I wanted to start. So this conversation that we're going to have is going to be a sort of a reflection. And we just before we turned on the microphones was talking about some of the influences that Bill Pollard, Dr. Bill Pollard, I'll keep saying that so Mariette won't get mad, but his lovely bride.
Nobody will get mad, George, but you and I.
All right, we good.
We don't count.
All right, we're good. So, and so he was reminding me that there are so many people that have had a profound impact, well-known and some not as well-known, and we're going to talk about that and how that move us today, and also talk about the state of the country and community. What I mean by that, I know that sounds broad, but we're in the midst of some stuff right now. Bill, as we talk, the conversation is about who will actually be on the presidential ticket. We know on the Republican side who it's going to be, but there's some discussion.
We do.
Yeah, right. Unfortunately. We do. Yeah. So, but this week or last week in Syracuse, there was a commemoration on the memory of John Lewis, of course, noted congressman and civil rights activist. And it's interesting because John Lewis often talked about good trouble. And I had the occasion to meet him once, actually twice, because he actually spoke, I believe he spoke at Syracuse for the MLK at some point. And also I was actually able to do a video with him when I was at WCNY and he was at Hobart. Okay. So having said all of that, good to see you, Dr. Bill Pollard.
Better to see you, George.
So let's start with John Lewis and your occasion to have done something with him at University of the District of Columbia. By the way, I got to also add just one more thing on the connections. So when our film Freedom's Call came out in 2005, and we were doing our press tour, and we had an opening at the Avalon Theater on Connecticut Avenue, and just down the street on Connecticut Avenue is the University of the District of Columbia, and we had a screening there, courtesy of Dr. Bill Pollard, who was the president at the time. So I just want to honor that as well. All right, now, John Lewis, let's talk about it.
Well, I think the important thing about John Lewis, George, and you and I have had the opportunity to meet him as a vibrant, distinguished man of the people and a man who set in motion all kinds of great things on our behalf. And I reflected with my former pastor just last week as we were talking about John Lewis, if you recall when he got shot down in Georgia, and how much that impacted not only him, but the rest of us who saw that. John Lewis was a young man, just a very active, go-getter college student, if you will, a seminary student. And he caused a lot of upheaval throughout the South, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
Good trouble, if you will, as he inspired other students like him to get involved with changing the nature of this country. And look where we've come in the last 50 years. It's almost in reverse what has taken place. But I had the pleasure of presenting him with an award in one of my last roles at the University of the District of Columbia, just to say thank you, John Lewis, for what you've done for us, and in particular, giving us the opportunity to honor you at the University of the District of Columbia. But he was a voice among many.
Mm.
And it's unfortunate that we don't have more like him today.
Yeah, and you say more like him today. And so that's an interesting way of phrasing it, right? Because we have a lot of people doing a lot of things today, but are you saying people that have the particular impact or the particular moral consciousness, the particular moral fiber? What do you mean by that? Because there are people out here in these streets, but what do you mean by that?
I mean by that, we don't have the kind of activism on our college campuses and our seminaries that we have then, because we are not as we aren't as emboldened as we were then, because we have a degree of freedom, and we've quickly forgotten how short a period of time ago that it was when we didn't have those freedoms, when we didn't have those opportunities. It's almost like how quickly we forget. And that's what I'm talking about. And I would imagine if we were to ask students today to identify the top 3 or 4 issues facing them as Black citizens or citizens who happen to be Black in this country, I'm sure that ill treatment by the system would not be at the top of the list. It might be related to employment. It might be related to individual family situations, but wouldn't have anything to do with the fact that we couldn't go buy lunch wherever we wanted. We couldn't go go see a movie wherever we wanted. We couldn't have any other kind of enjoy what other people across the country enjoy when they graduate from college, except maybe the closest thing that could come to it is what's happening on major college campuses today as they're confronting anti-Semitism and the stuff that's related to Israel today. That's probably all that comes closest to it from where I sit.
Is it because we have, as you describe that scenario, what I think about is it because we are the children of the dream, right? And the grandchildren of the dream. And so as we became better socialized in our mobility as Black folk, some of us did that by that mobility and moving around and opportunities that it presented itself. Did we fail in some ways to keep that fire in the very children who are the generation now, right? Did we forget to do something on our way to the mobility and the access that many of us now have? Did we forget to do something, or we gave it to them, but what happened? Why isn't the thread? Because some people might say, but Doc, there's activism around some things, but maybe not what it should be about.
There was activism around some things, George, but there were things that were not as important to the body as it was for you and I growing up then. I can recall sometimes hearing students say, "Oh, here he goes again," talking about some professor that was talking about the way they got treated way back when. And in some sense, that's what we're doing now. But the times are different, and we have choices now. We have the choice. We have the choice to go into any restaurant we want with the green card or whatever card we have, the one with the circles on it, the MasterCard. Anyone we want. But 60 years ago or longer, or when I was a college student, that was not the case. No, we don't serve Negroes here. No, we don't serve Black people here. Or there will be signs in the window that said, Negroes not allowed.
Is that what it said?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's basically what it was, George. Or you go by this.
Well, what I was saying is, did they say Negroes or did they use the pejorative?
They used the pejorative.
Okay.
They used the pejorative, and they had police and state support to maintain that system.
Mm-hmm.
I remember walking the civil rights line in Raleigh, North Carolina, by the Sir Walter Hotel, and people were throwing liquor down on us from the upper floors, or trying to get something to eat in the S&W cafeteria on the corner of Davies Street and Fayetteville Street. We could not enter. It was illegal to do so. Or if we went to the Ambassador Theater, if we went in, we had to sit upstairs in the balcony and couldn't sit on the main floor with white people. That was the case then. And that's a very, very big difference now. Kids go to the movies anywhere they want to go, and that's fine. But we don't understand at what cost that happened.
So then what do you think? So you've been a president on a college campus, and you've seen activism right in front of you. Was it, and not just in college campuses, let's even talk about in communities, right? And let's bring it forward to right here, right now. We got an issue. A despicable man could potentially be reelected president. A despicable person, okay, who is being aided and abetted by a Republican Party, who is ignoring all of that, and here we are, and it seems, whether you like the Democratic choice or not, and there's a lot of debate about that, but at least they're lining up and saying that's our guy. We're like, I don't know. So that's one thing. So with what's at stake, because the Supreme Court, who was appointed by him, the other man, Trump, has already shown you what they gonna do, and if he gets back in, what further damage they're gonna do. They already took away a woman's right to choose on the federal level. They already took away the protections of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, to name a few. So how do you get young people to understand that and reactivate around what's important to them right now? How do you do that? You're an elder, you're an elder now, okay? And so what's the gap between the elders and our youth who have a whole different perspective on things?
George, that's a very interesting question. It's a very important question. And I think for me, the difference has to be in how much we today, as members of the Academy, take upon ourselves to impart not just knowledge, but impart the legacy of how we have gotten here. If I can digress for just a minute.
Go ahead.
I have, when I was at the University of Chicago, where I got my PhD, I had the opportunity to study with John Hope Franklin, probably the greatest historian in this country of our time. And I recall, as I went to see him the first time, that I'm going to sit down with the man whose book we used at Shaw University back in the early 60s. That book, which became my Bible in one sense, about where we came from as African Americans to where we were when I was in school in Chicago in the late 60s and early 70s. It was a story basically from slavery to freedom. That was what John Hope Franklin wrote. Now, subsequently, I had the occasion to spend time with Franklin and to understand where he came from. And he didn't just come from Chicago. He came from Tulsa, Oklahoma,
Talk to me.
where his father's law practice was burned down in that infamous riot. And no, he didn't spend time getting revenge. He spent time learning how to pay back, to make sure that everybody understood what happened in Tulsa. He wrote about Tulsa. He talked about Tulsa, and he was among a group of citizens of Tulsa who hired Charles Ogletree, who was the lawyer that hired me at UDC when he was chair of the board. Charles Ogletree was working on behalf of the citizens of Tulsa whose property, whose businesses was burned down during the Tulsa riots at the turn of the last century, in the middle of the 1919 or during that period of time. But John Hope Franklin wasn't mad. John Hope Franklin was about the business of making sure that everybody knew what happened at Tulsa. That's what we have to do today. And those of us who sit in the academy today, we have a responsibility to teach paying it forward so that it doesn't happen again. I think if I were to make a request of people like you and I who sit in the academy today, it would be to look at how we got to be here. Look at why we have the knowledge we have and what sacrifices were made to get us there. I think about the time I spent with John Hope Franklin. I think about the time that I spent, believe it or not, with Kenneth Clark, who it's funny, George.
Say that name again. That didn't come through.
Kenneth Clark.
Oh, Kenneth Clark. Okay,
Kenneth
yes.
Clark, the doll study.
Yes.
Who provided the data that was used by the Supreme Court to decide that education in the United States of America was not only separate but unequal.
Yes.
Kenneth Clark and others like him were my heroes. And I think that today we have to ask ourselves, who are the heroes of young Black college students today? Who are the heroes of youngsters today who want to make a difference in the world of tomorrow? And if I may digress for a moment, I would say, George, where I sit today is a function of the men and women who taught me and the men and women they taught me about when I was in school. Men and women like Du Bois, men and women like Du Bois, men and women like Benjamin Mays, men and women who were doing things that made a difference in the society in which they grew up, and they had nothing except the capacity to think beyond what was. I had the occasion, and I know I'm digressing now, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I had the occasion to sit down with Benjamin Mays, who was then recently retired as president of Morehouse College. And my motivation to sit down with Benjamin Mays in the late 60s, early 70s, was because I had done some research, which was a study of Black self-help between 1890 and 1915. And the question that I put to Benjamin Mays was this: what was it about those people, like the ones he knew, Reverend Jenkins in South Carolina, in Charleston, South Carolina, a man who had virtually no education, and all he wanted to do was provide homes for orphan children in Charleston, South Carolina. And so he established what became known as the Jenkins Orphanage. And so my question to Benjamin Mays and others like him, why did they do that? And Mays said, well, because they saw the need and they did it. And that's what we have to do today. Today, I think we spend too much time selfishly trying to be better than or as good as. Whereas earlier, it was Black folk looking at the Black situation and knowing that if none of us rise, none of us will rise. And so we have to make opportunities for others in order to better everybody.
I love that idea. Talking with Dr. William Pollard, President Emeritus, UDC, University District of Columbia, Medgar Evers College, and of course, Emeritus Dean at Syracuse University School of Social Work. You know, as you talked about that, so and my question was regarding why is what's the gap between you as an elder and the people who taught you about the people they taught you about, and what's different today? And you mentioned the academy, and we see now because of people like this group that's in their convention this past week, what they're doing across the country to prevent this generation from learning about the people who you learned about. You're looking at Florida, you're looking at Texas, right? You're looking at the situation with Israel and Gaza and the impact that that's had on Harvard president and Columbia and other institutions who, and that's not this issue, but I'm just saying the academy itself now regarding diversity and equity and inclusion and these kinds of things, where, you know, I don't know what to say about this, but it feels like in this environment, what you're looking for in some states might not even be legal, right?
Yeah.
So help me then in this environment right now achieve what you think we need to achieve to make sure that we are passing that legacy on. Because what I'm hearing you say, Dr. Pollard, is that what you were given, and let's go back to your famous eggs, the eggs that you were given are not as freely given in some parts of our country anymore, right? And I'm overgeneralizing, I know, to make the broader point.
You may be overgeneralizing, but you make a good point, George. I think the difference in what I've tried to do in my instruction was to replicate what was done for me as I received my elementary and junior high school and high school education. That's what I'm trying to do. You got to remember, I was born in 1944. I went to an all-Black elementary school. I went to an all-Black junior high school.
Mm-hmm.
There were no white kids in my senior high school. There were no white teachers in any of the schools that I attended in Raleigh, North Carolina. But what I learned from those Black teachers, those teachers who went to not just Black historically colleges and universities, but they also went to the Michigans of the world, the NYUs of the world, and they got the education. They got the pedigree that anybody else would get who taught at that particular time. And they always said stuff to us to make us or help us to understand what the world really was. Let me give you a classic example. We had a music teacher when I was in the 5th grade, 4th or 5th grade, who came to teach us how to play the recorder, a white guy. Whenever he walked in the room, the first thing he would do was to throw up a window. It could be snowing. Rarely did it snow in Raleigh, however, but it was cold outside. He would go and come in and throw up the window. When he left, we asked the teacher, why does he always raise the window? You know what the teacher said to us? He thinks we stink. And he wants air in the classroom. We didn't laugh, George. We understood our teacher was giving us some information about the way we were perceived in the world. Think about that. Well, now the question before you go, the question that we have to ask, how many teachers do that today? How many teachers today take the time to help their Black students to understand that they live in a prejudicial world that thinks very little of them, whether they're Black students or white students? Those teachers then took on the responsibility to know that much of what we needed to know to be successful in the world, we were not going to get at home, nor were we going to get in certain kinds of classrooms. So they taught us to expect to be treated differently because we were Black, and that we had to come back at that with more than they thought we could do. And that's what propelled us, that's what motivated us to go to the Chicagos and the North Carolinas and those other great schools of the world. And that's what Benjamin Mays was trying to sell to those students at Morehouse and at Atlanta University. And that's what James Cheek did for us at Shaw University.
Well, the reason, and what I was trying to cut in to tell you this idea about this opening up the window, I wanted to fast forward to January of 2024, when one of the flight attendants on American Airlines complained about the body odor of one of the passengers, and they removed all of the Black men off that flight. Did you hear about that?
I didn't hear about that.
Oh, because I remembered in January 2024, American Airlines removed 8 Black men from a flight from Phoenix to New York after a white male flight attendant complained about an unidentified passenger's body odor. And the only reason why I know about this is because in May of this year, 3 of the men filed a lawsuit against American Airlines because they basically said, we don't know who it is, but it's some Black man. And so they removed them all from the plane. Now, they were eventually allowed on the plane an hour later, but just this idea of, I mean, it was reminiscent of this idea of opening up the...
George, you got to be lying about that.
I wish I was, bro. I wish I was.
So it's still happening.
That's what I'm saying. Okay? That's what I'm saying. Like, you're telling me something and I'm telling you in this year, the year of 2024, this happened. American Airlines, and they filed a lawsuit, right? They removed them, and they weren't related to each other. It was just like, you, could you please come off the plane? Okay? Anyway. So
that's
right?
That takes gall.
Yeah. And so Doc, we're in a pickle now. We're in a pickle.
No, we are in a pickle, but let me tell you why I think we're in a pickle, because we may not be thinking about the same thing.
Go ahead.
I think we're in a pickle because we today lack the courage.
Talk to me.
We lack the courage to help our young people to understand that these things are happening and will continue to happen until we rise up and call attention to this fact of this very direct and subtle racism in this country, because that's what we're talking about. Black people stink. People from Africa stink. That's the bottom line. And folks can get away with saying that and passing that on. That's what our teachers helped me to understand. And I'm approaching my 80th birthday. And I don't think teachers teach that way today. I don't think they do, George. I mean, if you look around today and walk through our schools, and I've not done that in a while, what are the expectations for Black kids? What are the expectations of Black kids today?
Well, I'm going to ask a different question then, bro.
Okay.
What are our expectations of our kids in the classrooms? Because what the teachers would tell you is, okay, we got to get ugly for a minute before we pretty up. In one singular instance, this ain't all the parents, but in one singular instance, the teacher is trying to hold a kid accountable. The mother comes in and beats the teacher up. Come on now. All right? So I ask ourselves the question, what is our expectation of our children in that classroom right now, right? Or in community? What is our expectations, right? Because we can't expect, this is my thing. You argue with me, make me wrong, Doc. We can't expect that institution to do what it's supposed to do if we ain't gonna do what we supposed to do on this side of it, right? So if you can't just say, go ahead, educate my kid, and then be mad when they don't educate your kid when you ain't doing nothing with them at home. Talk to me. Tell me that I'm off the chart somewhere, Doc, because I don't understand, because I understand what you're saying. You're right about that. But at the same time, what's our obligation to our own kids?
You make an interesting point, George, and I won't deny that what you just described has happened. All I can do is look back. I'm approaching 80, so all I can do is look back, probably 75, no, probably 65 to 70 years ago, and wonder what would have been the case then. What would have been the case at Crosby Garfield and Raleigh or Lucille Hunter? Let me tell you what would happen then. The teachers would have been whooping that kid's rear end. The teachers would have been disciplining that child. And the parent would have been disciplining that child again when he or she got home, when they learned that they had been disciplined at school. That's what would have been happening then. Do you think any of Betty's children, Betty Pollard that is, would have been misbehaving that way? No, because those children would have, Betty's children would have had to go home and get another whipping. Because Betty didn't play that. Linwood didn't play that. The teacher was the authority. That's what we were taught. We were taught anybody in a position of power has the authority to do what they can and they will to get you educated. No, they didn't play that. And I suspect you know about that. I suspect that you would not dare go home knowing that a teacher was going to call and say you had to be disciplined that day for some reason, whether it was right or wrong or not.
I was scared to bring a letter home.
You would get another when you got home.
Yeah.
They just didn't play that, George. That was a, you know, it's funny. As I reflect on that and think about my 6 years in elementary school at Crosby Garfield and my 3 years at Washington Junior High, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. I think about George Coburn and W.A. Rainbow and those Black teachers who walked the halls with their paddles. Don't come to school late. Don't come to school without your homework. And they brought terror because there was only one thing they were interested in, getting you educated.
All right, Doc, but you know, we're the new age now. And the new age says sport. What we say, spare the rod, or not spare the rod, but like
rod, sport the child.
Right. Or but the new age is we're not into spanking no more. We're not, and I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I'm saying people are saying there is some reflection on the effectiveness of that. So, all right, but what you are saying is discipline was gonna happen one way or the other, and you're gonna reflect and respect that. Doc, there's so much on it.
Discipline was given, and discipline wasn't just physical.
Right.
It wasn't just physical. Discipline was also taking time away from you to do the things you enjoy.
Yeah.
So you didn't go outside for a play period during the school day. You had to eat lunch with the teacher in the classroom. You didn't get a chance to go to eat with your friends or go outside and eat with your friends. There was a sense of the importance of discipline that was place and time specific. And we don't do, so it's easier now to put the kid out of school and God knows what the kid's going to go to when he or she goes home or on the way home.
You know, Doc, it reminds me of a conversation I had recently with someone. And so let's talk about the village, right? Because somebody we know in the village that we belong to, the grandkids ain't doing what they're supposed to do. And in that conversation, I was saying, well, you got to tell the grandparents that the grandkids ain't doing what they supposed to do. And they were hesitant to do that, right? Because of the relationship or the prominence of the, but because the grandkids are not reflecting their upbringing. They're not reflecting their upbringing, but in the village, we don't want to say nothing now.
George, there's something else that you remind me of when you share that. There was a time when a family or a neighborhood would be embarrassed when somebody acted out or acted up.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the individual that was acting up or got punished. It was the community. And the way I'm thinking about that is the fact that we would see drunkenness in our community. And the drunkenness that we would see in our community was something that we didn't really laugh about because we knew that drunkard was somebody's daddy,
Mm-hmm.
Or somebody's older brother, or somebody's mama. I mean, that was the kind of community that I grew up in, and Betty and Linwood made no distinction about the fact that that's not the way you want to go. That's not the way you want to go. There were things that I saw growing up that my mother knew that she did not want from me or Larry or Lucy or Linwood or any of us. And she made a point of saying, you're going to get it. If you don't get it at school, you're going to get it at home, because there's a way you got to do it. And we have to do it the right way. George, if I had to do it over again, I think I would want my kids to experience some of my growing up, because it's almost too easy.
Which is what you worked hard to do, to make it easier for your children.
I didn't work hard to make it easier. I worked it hard to try to provide them with a lifestyle that gets them somewhere in the future.
But that's easier than you had it.
No, it's not about easier than me having it. It's about making certain that they didn't have to suffer the way we suffer, and that they can live beyond that. You talked about the eggs earlier, or alluded to my eggs, and it's something that I have done on a regular basis until recently, when I haven't been out as much on the circuit and so forth. But the eggs that I gave to people were eggs that Booker T. Washington was given by a poor colored woman, poor Black woman, helping him to build Tuskegee Institute. And this was when Booker T. Washington was building Tuskegee Institute and trying to raise money.
Mm-hmm.
And you know the story, perhaps your audience won't know the story, but when they read the autobiography of Booker T. Washington, they will read about a man who was raising money for this school called Tuskegee Institute. And one afternoon, while he's cleaning up, this former slave comes into the classroom and she says, I don't have any money, but I want to help you to build this school for our children. And so what did she give Booker T. Washington? 6 eggs that she got out of her hen house that day. I ain't got no money, but I got these 6 eggs. Now, over the years, I've given out a bunch of eggs. An egg for literacy, a leg for togetherness, a leg for egg for encouragement. All of this is about reflection on what this Black woman gave to Booker T. Washington to build Tuskegee Institute. Well, the teachers that I went to elementary school did something very similar. They gave us egg of inspiration. They taught us how to pray. And somebody will tell us today, it ain't school's responsibility to teach kids how to pray. That's the responsibility of the home. Well, if they don't get it at home, George, where they gonna get it?
Where they gonna get it?
Where they gonna get it? And so the teachers that taught me were teachers who had gone to Shaw University, had gone to Livingstone College, had gone to Tuskegee Institute, and they had learned that a spiritual grounding was important to the development of the whole person.
Mm.
And so schools like Livingstone College and Shaw University and St. Augustine and Wilberforce, they all had spiritual underpinnings. And when Du Bois wrote Souls of Black Folk, he had a chapter devoted to our spiritual strivings, because what we have become as a people is caught up into what created this world we live in. It's both spiritual and is about hard work. And I think that probably what we may be missing today is the fact that, I put it this way, if kids today don't have some devotional service in their classrooms, I'm willing to bet they may not be getting it anywhere.
Mm.
Is it the responsibility of the schools to do that? I'm not gonna say it is, but I'm gonna tell you that for a lot of kids growing up, as I grew up, they probably would not have been getting it at all.
But the thing is, and I understand exactly what you're saying, but today you got people of all different faiths. So if you're saying there needs to be some sort of centering time where you can reflect, I don't know, but because you can't, right? We're not that nation anymore, right? We got a lot of different ways of being, and so if you start, I understand what you're saying, and it's true, but how do you do that in today's society when you got, look right here in the Syracuse City School District, we got people from all over the world. You know what I mean?
I'd be willing to bet that amongst these people from all over the world, there's some place in their community / governmental / family process.
Oh yeah. Oh for sure. Oh yeah.
Spiritual grounding.
Okay.
And the question is, if we don't, who will? Now, I went to school at Shaw University. I taught at Livingstone College. And I've had a lot of Black college and Black university experiences. And all of those institutions are grounded.
Yeah.
They're grounded. And they have assumed a responsibility of giving. I mean, what is higher education but an effort to take a creature, human being, and take him from point A to point Z? And when you and I look at the world today, what's going to be missing if they don't get a sense of man's personality, man's being? Where does a man get grounded? Where does a person get grounded? Where does one learn the difference between right and wrong?
So what did your parents teach you?
I'll tell you a quick story, George. One morning, and I can almost remember the time that it happened. My mama said to my father, it's time for these kids to go to church. And there was a little church around the corner, Davies Street United Presbyterian Church. And I can remember it as though it was yesterday, and I'm almost 80. Dad had taken us to this church, opening the side door. Larry, Luce, and I opened the door and just pushed us in. Somebody saw us, and I went upstairs. Mrs. Reachel, Larry, and Lucy went somewhere else. We grew up in that church. I don't know where I'd be without the nurturing that I got, the spiritual growth that I got from that church. In fact, you know Gene Turner, don't you?
Yes.
Well, Gene Turner, one of Gene's closest friends was my pastor in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Mm.
And Oscar visited Gene last summer. We spent quite a bit of time together, reflecting on these and other things. This man, Oscar McLeod, was a Presbyterian minister, as Gene was a Presbyterian minister. And what I got from Davie Street United Presbyterian Church, my classmates, my high school and elementary school classmates, they got it from First Baptist. They got it from the Episcopal Church down the street from me. They got it in First Baptist Church. And they got it and they took it with them throughout life.
Mm.
And they got it because the parents understood that they needed some grounding. Well, if you never get into a church, where do you get it? And when I went to Shaw University, there were two interesting requirements at Shaw in the general education curriculum. One was a course in Bible, and the other was a course in Christian ethics. And we also had to take 2 philosophy courses. They didn't tell us to be Episcopalian or Baptist, but they told us that we needed to look at the whole world, and that regardless of where we were in time, that people over there, down there, and back there, they all had some kind of spiritual grounding. Grateful for that opportunity. And as I mentioned those names, George, I'd be remiss if I said that my parents reared me and my 7 siblings by themselves. They didn't. They reared us with the help of scores of other men and women who were grounded in some kind of orientation that was worth passing on, and they pass it on.
And so when you think about your own legacy and your most significant achievements and the advice you would give as an elder to the community, and also how we going to get out of this mess election-wise, what are you offering us?
You know, it's interesting. I looked at Donald Trump with that piece of white tape attached to his ear, and I pondered to myself, and I won't share what I really pondered. But God was good to him that day.
Mm-hmm.
But he may have been not so good to us. Now he's going to run for that presidency with a renewed mission, as though as he's been given a grace from God.
Mm-hmm.
That God let him continue to run for a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
That may be what he will try to do with that. And I don't know if I buy that, George. I think that people like you and I, maybe who are not in a church or not doing it for church, have to model what we want from others.
Mm-hmm.
And I see you doing that in some ways, and I try to do it in others. And maybe as we look to the future, we have to ask ourselves, to what extent are our institutions doing as well for their constituents as was done for us or them? we 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 owe something. We owe something to this generation because it won't get what we got.
Mm-hmm.
I know as much about your background as I'd like to know, um, but I know you, and I know that your kids are going to be grounded spiritually
Yeah.
because I've seen you with them, and I've seen you in settings which I'm sure they're going to get that spiritual grounding. I'd like to think uh, uh, that my two sons, uh, though they're a little bit different from me, um, they have a different education than I. I think they got some grounding that will enable them to make better life decisions as they move on down the road, and that will enable them to impart a knowledge and a kind of orientation to their kids that may benefit them as I've been benefited. The thing about me, George, that I would want people to take away is that I'm not self-made. I'm not self-made. I'm a function of what Betty and Leonard Pollard brought into the world. And then they had the audacity to say they didn't know everything that I needed to know. And so what did they do in response to that? My mother made sure that I got a religious education. She didn't send me to a Bible school. She didn't send me to a church related school. She put me in that church around the corner. That was part of my spiritual education. She made certain that I spent time with her older brothers and her sisters so that I got a sense of what family is about somewhere else. And from her oldest brother, Luther, who was a deacon in his church, I saw a man who was as powerful in that church as he was on that farm growing tobacco.
Mm.
And from my father's father, who was a deacon in his church, I saw a man who was gruff and, I have a warm, fuzzy memory about my father's father, Clarence. Um, I remember George. I was at the University of Chicago at the time, and I went to Cary. He grew up. My father grew up in Cary, North Carolina, and I went to see him. And Papa was sitting on the front porch. Everybody called my father's father Papa. He was sitting on the front porch, and I sat down with him, and we just spent some time together. But during the course of it, I was thinking about where I had just come from. I had just come to Raleigh from Chicago. I had just flunked a series, not a series, I had flunked an exam in research and statistics.
Mm-hmm.
And when I went to see the professor about makeup and that kind of stuff, you know what the professor said to me?
What did he say?
And bear in mind that at the time, this is 19, went to Chicago in 71. This would have been spring of 72. You know what he said to me? Maybe you don't belong here.
Mm.
Now, when I sat down with my grandfather and I was reflecting on that semester, my first year at the University of Chicago School of Social Service Administration, and we were talking, and I started crying. And Papa put his arms around me, and that was the only time in the time that I knew him, and I think he passed when I was teaching at Pitt. I would have been around 85 or 86. That was the only time that I ever felt what I felt, and he put his arms around me and let me cry.
Mm.
You know how they do children, you know, he just passed
Hmm.
away. Just me and him sitting on his front porch in Cary, North Carolina.
Papa.
Papa, Papa. Everybody called him Papa. Um, but what my takeaway from that is that children have to be given the opportunity to be children, regardless of how old they are. And my daddy didn't come to see me graduate from the University of North Carolina when I got my degree in social work. But his two youngest daughters were there. My father's sisters were there.
Mm.
To say congratulations. My father wasn't there. My mother was there.
How'd you feel about that?
I felt that I felt Daddy had done what he could do.
What he could do.
What he could do. And you know, George, when I went into the second year of my graduate study, I knew I had to do a field placement, and I knew I needed transportation. Daddy borrowed, I think it was $500, so I could get 62 Chevy Biscayne. I think that's what it cost from a finance company. So I could get back and forth between Chapel Hill and to my field placement in Greensboro. There was a sensitivity that I learned to appreciate as I grew older. He did what he had to do, and he did what he could to support me and my efforts.
And so some of the things that you take from that is a love of reading, a love of being informed. You talk about the lessons that you would rather you're really about having a spiritual foundation. But you also tell folk that we need to travel and get out of our comfort zone and explore and experience. And back to I'm just thinking about how I guess I'm thinking about with all of that, how do we fix what we need to fix right now? Because I'm coming back to it because we got a literacy challenge right now. We've got new opportunities that the fear is that our community, Black folk, won't be able to take advantage of, that's sitting right here in front of us. So there's these things, right? And so you're giving us some things right now, which I think will help us to rethink. But what we're going to do right now, like today, somebody listening to this, somebody watching this, what we're going to do right now? Because we got to do something right now, because what you're giving me is the wisdom and the retraining and the rethinking, and you're giving us a blueprint. But right now, we're in the midst of it. What are we going to do?
I'll tell you, George, I'm glad my wife is not in the next room listening to me. I think what we have to do, and I know you well enough to say this, I think we have to keep doing what we are doing, especially you. Because if not you, who? Without you, who's going to do this show? Or who's going to do a show like this? And back in the day, there was a guy named Hilton Riddick, who worked for WLLE in Raleigh. It was any number of young men and women, some of whom are not with us today. But people need to see us do what we do. You mentioned my eggs earlier and giving out eggs. And I was talking with my colleague and friend in Pittsburgh, and I've been trying to write this autobiography, George. And I don't know whether it's going to be an autobiography or a memoir. And it's increasingly is coming to be a memoir. And I've written some stuff when I thought I was writing an autobiography, I actually started with my earliest years as I can remember them. And I think I wrote about 80 pages. But then subsequently, I have been doing more reflective work that's in the spirit of what Du Bois and
Yes.
Booker Washington did, a memoir. Uh,
Right. And I just wanted to add something to this. You triggered me. We're also coming up on Baldwin's 100th birthday.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, it's interesting you mentioned Baldwin. As I said that, and I remember the first book of his that I ever read in my life. It was Another Country.
Another country.
Another Country, and I read it when I was working in Maine one summer. And I said to myself, my God, this guy is a beast. I mean, he was a beast. And he did everything you and I would ever want to do. Um, and he was an inspiration in several different ways. Um, well, you take me back a ways when you mention uh, Baldwin. Um, he was a special guy, and so was Malcolm X. I mean, we could go off and on those things. I like I liken I like to think that who I am today, um, beginning with Betty and Linda and their siblings. I'm a composite of all of them, and then I'm a function of all the encounters I've had in life with people like John Hope Franklin and Kenneth Clark. Uh, did I ever tell you that I got a small grant from Kenneth Clark to do my research, my historical research?
No,
Are you from New York? Are you New
I'm
York?
from New York. Yes.
You know the name James R. Dumpson?
I don't know that name.
James R. Dumpson was the first black dean of a major school of social work in this country. He was the first black dean at Fordham University.
Mm.
His name. I think when he was named dean at Fordham, he was first black dean in the country of the School of Social Work. Well, I met Jim when he came to speak in North Carolina at North Carolina A&T, and he subsequently took pity on this poor black boy from North Carolina, and he tried to make certain that I never wanted for anything when it came to trying to become whatever I became. And that included letters of recommendation, and it included introducing me to one of his closest friends, Kenneth Clark. So I'm working on my dissertation, and I need money. I need money to get to the Hampton Library, needed money to get to Morehouse College to interview Benjamin Mays, spend time in those libraries at Morehouse and Atlanta. Mm-hmm. And I said to Jim, I need money. And he said, okay, let me look around and I'll get back to you. Next thing I know, I get a letter from, I get a phone call from Jim Dumpson, and he says, I got a friend I want you to meet, but you're gonna have to come to New York. I said, okay. Unfortunately, I ran a small program at Livingstone College, and I was able to fly to New York and meet his good friend, Kenneth Clark. And he had arranged for me to spend a couple of hours with Kenneth Clark one morning. I flew into New York in the evening, and he picked me up, had his driver to pick me up, because then he was commissioner of public welfare for the city of New York. The driver picked me up at the airport, take me to his apartment. I got up early the next morning. His driver took me to meet Kenneth Clark at the Metropolitan Applied Research Corporation office. And I spent about an hour and a half with Kenneth Clark and two members of his staff. And at the end of that hour and a half meeting, Kenneth Clark said, it was great to meet you. Enjoyed talking with you. We'll be in touch. A week later, I had a check for $2,000.
Wow.
Now, it may not seem like a lot of money today, George, but that money got me to Atlanta. That money got me to spend a 4 or 5 days in Hampton, Virginia. lodging in Hampton, Virginia, Xeroxing, the DC Library of Congress, where I did a lot of my research. That's what Jim Dumpson did for me. That's why when Jim Dumpson died at 103, I could cry like a baby because I knew I lost a friend. And that's what you and I have to do. And that's what I've tried to do with the folk that I've taught over the past. I started teaching in 69, all of 69. I taught at Grambling and at Pitt and here and UDC and Medford. And what I tried to do with all of them was to make certain that they learn how to ask for help and to give them whatever help that I could offer to enable them to be successful in whatever they do. And that's what I'm going to expect from you. And I hope you will expect that of me, is that we got to give back to get.
Dr. William Pollard, I want to say Dean Emeritus at Syracuse University, School of Social Work, President, UDC, University District of Columbia, President of the Medgar Evers College in New York City, but a friend of G.K. George Kilpatrick and a friend of this community. And it was certainly a pleasure to spend this time with you, and it won't be the last time. Since you're working on the memoir, you got some more eggs for us, so I'm sure that we will talk again for the people, because what you have to say and what you're encouraging us to be is important for us to hear. And so before we go, if there's one more thing you want to say, here's your opportunity. But if not, we're going to say, bless you, brother. Keep doing what you're doing.
I look forward to coming back, George.
Inspiration for the nation.